In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
The galaxy burns with 10,000 years of unending conflict, and faith has replaced reason as the currency of survival. Into this darkness, something impossible arrived. Not from the warp's madness, but from beyond the very boundaries of reality itself. A fleet that carried warriors who still believed in peace. They would learn that some universes reject such naive notions with extreme prejudice. The Republic battle group emerged screaming. Venator-class star destroyers tore through the membrane between dimensions in a cascade of impossibility. Their red and white hulls scored by energies that had never touched real space. Warning klaxons shrieked through every corridor as artificial gravity failed, recovered, then failed again. Clone troopers were thrown against bulkheads, their white and blue armor clattering against dura steel. Officers shouted coordinates that made no sense. Navigation computers displayed star charts that matched no known Republic territory. On the bridge of the Resolute, Jedi General Anakin Skywalker gripped the command rail as the deck bucked beneath his boots. His mechanical hand crushed the metal slightly. He didn't notice. Around him, clone officers struggled to restore order to systems that reported contradictory data. The hyperspace tunnel they'd been traveling through hadn't simply collapsed. It had been torn, ripped open by something vast and hungry that existed in the space between spaces. "General, hyperdrive is completely offline," reported Commander Cody, his helmet's HUD flickering with damage assessments. "We've lost 3 escort frigates. The Prosecutor and Defender are still with us, but their drives are dead too. We're stranded." Anakin reached out with the Force, seeking the calm center that Obi-Wan had spent years teaching him to find. What he touched instead made him recoil. The Force was there, he could feel it, that familiar energy field that connected all living things. But something else pressed against it. Something that screamed and laughed and whispered promises of power in 1,000 discordant voices. It was like standing in a serene lake while a tsunami approached from every direction at once. The light side remained, but it swam in an ocean of madness that the Jedi had never encountered, never imagined, never prepared for. "Anakin?" Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared beside him, one hand steadying himself against a console. The other rested near his lightsaber, unconscious habit in crisis. His blue eyes showed the same shocked recognition. "You feel it too. What is that?" Anakin's voice was rough. "It's not the dark side, but it's hungry, watching us. I don't know." Obi-Wan's admission carried weight. The older Jedi had faced Sith Lords, navigated the political quagmire of the Senate, and maintained his center through the horrors of the Clone Wars. To hear uncertainty in his voice unsettled the bridge crew more than any damage report. "But we need to establish our position and assess." "General!" A clone navigation officer stood rigid at his station. "We've got stellar radiation readings that match nothing in Republic records. The star patterns are completely unknown. Sir, I don't think we're in our galaxy anymore." The words hung in the sudden silence. Anakin opened his mouth to respond when the Resolute's long-range sensors began screaming alerts. Commander Cody's helmet snapped toward his tactical display. "Contact! Multiple ships on intercept vector bearing 237 by 185. Configuration unknown. They're Emperor's bones. They're massive." On the main view screen, enhanced magnification revealed shapes emerging from the stellar debris field ahead. They were ships. At least, they served that function. But they looked like cathedrals of war given engine thrust. Kilometers-long vessels bristled with weapon batteries, their hulls adorned with Gothic architecture that made no tactical sense. Spires and buttresses jutted from armor plating thick enough to deflect asteroid impacts. The largest bore a prow shaped like an aquila, a two-headed eagle that gleamed with hostile intent. Those designs... Obi-Wan stepped closer to the view screen, his hand unconsciously touching his beard. They're not just military vessels. They're monuments. Religious iconography on warships of that scale suggests a civilization where faith and warfare are inseparable. "They're hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Audio only. The signal is raw, barely encrypted. Sir, they're broadcasting in a language that the translator can't fully parse, but I'm getting keywords. Heretic, Xenos, Purge." Anakin and Obi-Wan exchanged glances. The Jedi had negotiated with separatists, pirates, crime syndicates, and hostile planetary governments. They understood the language of power and threat. But there was something in those translated words that promised an ideology beyond mere hostility, a zealotry that would not bend. "Open a channel," Obi-Wan commanded. "Broadcast on all frequencies. This is Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Galactic Republic. We've suffered a navigational accident and mean no intrusion into your space. We request peaceful contact to establish dialogue and determine..." The transmission cut off as the lead cathedral ship opened fire. Lance batteries erupted in synchronized volleys, macro cannons launching ordnance the size of LAT gunships. The void between vessels became a web of destruction that obeyed no treaty, recognized no white flag, and offered no warning beyond the act of violence itself. "Evasive maneuvers." Anakin's command came simultaneously with Cody's tactical assessment. The Resolute's sublight drives burned hard, rolling the Star Destroyer into a defensive posture that its designers had never anticipated needing. Turbo laser batteries swiveled to return fire, and the Republic fleet learned their first lesson about the 41st millennium. Their weapons, designed for ship-to-ship combat in a galaxy where warfare followed certain technological paradigms, struck armor plate blessed by 10,000 years of fanatical faith. The turbo laser impacts flared against void shields that flickered with barely understood physics, dispersing energy that should have cored through hulls. Some shots penetrated, scoring the cathedral ship's armor, but the damage was superficial, cosmetic. The return fire was not. A macro cannon shell struck the Resolute's port hangar bay and detonated with the force of a small nuclear device. Atmosphere vented in explosive decompression, carrying clone troopers, LAT gunships, and ARC-170 fighters into the void. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but 3 entire decks were simply gone, sheared away as if a god had taken a bite from the destroyer's flank. "Shields at 40%, reported the engineering officer. "We can't take many more hits like that." Anakin's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed for counterattack, for the aggressive tactics that had earned him the title of hero with no fear. But the Force, distorted as it was, still offered guidance. Pressing this fight meant destruction. The cathedral ships outnumbered them, outgunned them, and showed no hesitation in their assault. "All ships, emergency jump," Anakin commanded. "Any heading, maximum burn." "Hyperdrives are still offline, General," Cody reported grimly. "We're running on sublight only." Obi-Wan's hand found Anakin's shoulder. "Then we run on sublight. Commander, plot a course toward that debris field at maximum acceleration. We need cover and distance." As the Resolute and its 2 escort destroyers burned away from the engagement zone, pursued by lance fire that carved furrows through the void, the clone troopers manning their stations showed no fear. They had been bred for obedience, trained for war, and conditioned to follow their Jedi generals through any hell. They could not know that they had just entered a galaxy where hell was the baseline, and it only got worse from there. If you're hungry for tales of what-if scenarios that shake the foundations of the 41st millennium, hit subscribe and join the crusade for more content. Because this war has only just begun, and the Republic is about to learn that in the grim darkness of the far future, there truly is only war. Behind them, the Imperial Navy vessels slowed their pursuit. On the bridge of the Divine Mandate, Captain Jurgen Hoth studied the retreating Xenos craft with cold calculation. They were fast, maneuverable, and their weapons, while ineffective against proper Imperial armor, showed technological sophistication that the Mechanicus would wish to examine. After they had been properly purged, of course. He turned to his Vox officer. Send priority transmission to Inquisitor Covenant of the Ordo Xenos. Inform him that we have encountered vessels of unknown origin bearing weaponry and design paradigms inconsistent with any known Xenos threat. They attempted communication in Low Gothic before fleeing. His expertise is required. The officer saluted and bent to his task. Hoth returned his gaze to the view screen. Watching the Xenos ships disappear into the debris field of a dead world the Imperium had virus-bombed 3 centuries prior. Let them run. Let them hide. The Imperium had been purging Xenos from the galaxy for 10 millennia. These newcomers, whoever they were, would be no different. The Emperor protects, and the Emperor's servants destroy. The Resolute limped through the debris field like a wounded animal seeking shelter in a forest of corpses. Around them, the shattered remains of what had once been an Imperial hive world drifted in silent testimony to violence on a scale that made the Clone Wars look restrained. Entire city blocks tumbled through vacuum, their Gothic spires twisted and melted. Bodies, millions of them, hung frozen in poses of their final agony, their flesh preserved by the void's sterile cold. What kind of weapon does this? Clone Captain Rex stood at the viewport, his helmet tucked under one arm. His voice carried the flat affect of a soldier processing horror by categorizing it. The structural damage isn't consistent with orbital bombardment. This is molecular, like something broke down organic matter at a cellular level. Obi-Wan moved beside him, his face grim. A plague weapon, perhaps, or something worse. He gestured toward a drifting hab block where bodies were visible through shattered windows. Look at their positions. They weren't fleeing. They died where they stood, where they slept. This was extermination, not warfare. The difference being? Anakin approached from the command deck, his presence radiating barely controlled anger. The strange pressure in the Force had only intensified since they'd entered the debris field, as if something vast and malevolent found his frustration delicious. Warfare has objectives, Obi-Wan replied quietly. This was erasure. Someone decided an entire world should simply cease to exist. In the Resolute's medical bay, Jedi healers tended to the wounded from the hangar bay decompression. Clone troopers with suits breached by shrapnel, technicians suffering from rapid pressure changes, and 3 pilots who had been blown into space but recovered by emergency tractor beams before their air ran out. The Kaminoans had engineered the clones for resilience, but no genetic manipulation could prepare them for the existential weight of being stranded in an unknown galaxy where the first contact had been immediate, overwhelming violence. Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano moved through the medical bay with practiced efficiency, using the Force to ease pain and accelerate healing where Bacta patches were already in short supply. At 19, she'd grown from Anakin's Padawan into a capable warrior and healer in her own right. But even her training hadn't prepared her for what she sensed every time she opened herself to the Force. "It's like standing in a river that flows in every direction at once," she told Master Plo Koon, who worked beside her on a trooper with a collapsed lung. "The Force is there, Master, but something else is tangled with it. Something that notices when I reach out." Plo Koon's breathing mask hissed softly as he considered. The Keldor Jedi Master had survived countless battles through careful judgment and deeper understanding of the Force's mysteries. "I sense it as well, young one. The cosmic force connects all living things across space and time. But here, in this place, something has poisoned the connection. It feels malevolent, conscious, and far older than the Republic." A klaxon interrupted further discussion. Throughout the ship, alert lights flashed amber. Commander Cody's voice echoed through the internal comms. "All hands to stations. Sensors are picking up an approaching vessel, single-ship frigate class. Configuration matches the cathedral ships that attacked us, but smaller. They're broadcasting a signal." Anakin was already moving, his boots ringing against deck plates as he sprinted for the bridge. Ahsoka followed, her leku twitching with anticipation. Behind them, clone troopers secured their helmets and checked their DC-15 blasters with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers who had learned that peace was always temporary. On the bridge, the tactical display showed the approaching vessel with painful clarity. It was perhaps a third the size of the cathedral ships that had driven them into the debris field. But it bore the same aggressive architecture. A prow shaped like a battering ram, hull covered in script and symbols that the Republic's translators struggled to parse, where the larger vessels had been instruments of overwhelming force. This one moved with surgical precision, its engines burning in controlled bursts that spoke of expert piloting. "They're hailing again," reported the communications officer. "Same language as before, but the translation matrix is adapting. I'm getting more coherent phrases now. Compliance. Inquisition. Interrogation. Sir, they're demanding we power down our weapons and prepare to receive boarding parties." "Absolutely not." Anakin's response was immediate. "We don't know their intentions, their culture, or their concept of prisoners' rights. For all we know, boarding means execution." Obi-Wan stroked his beard thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving the approaching vessel. "Actually, Anakin, this could be an opportunity. They've sent a smaller ship, a diplomatic overture, perhaps, after the initial hostility. If they wanted us destroyed, those cathedral ships could have pursued us into the debris field. Or it's a trap. Possibly. But we can't run forever. Our hyperdrive is inoperable. We're cut off from Republic space, and we have no idea where we are or how to return home." Obi-Wan turned to face his former Padawan. "We need information. These people, hostile as they are, clearly control this region of space. We need to understand them if we're to survive." The tension on the bridge was palpable. Clone officers watched their Jedi generals debate, hands hovering near sidearms, knowing that whatever decision came next would determine whether they lived to see another day. Anakin's mechanical hand flexed unconsciously. Every instinct screamed against submission, against allowing unknown hostiles access to Republic vessels and personnel. But Obi-Wan's logic was sound. They were trapped in unknown space, damaged and outgunned. Pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Fine," Anakin growled. "But we meet them on our terms. Open the main hangar bay, not the damaged one. Redirect power from weapons to shields. Have a full platoon of the 501st ready, with heavy weapons positioned behind cover, and every Jedi on this ship needs to be present." Obi-Wan nodded approval. "Show of force, but not aggression. Good. Commander Cody, transmit our acceptance. Tell them we'll receive a small delegation in our hangar bay. No more than 10 individuals. The communications officer worked his console, broadcasting the message in the fragmented Gothic they'd managed to decipher. The response came quickly. A single word that the translator rendered as acceptable. 30 minutes later, the smaller cathedral ship, designated an inquisitorial cutter by its hull markings, docked with the Resolute's hangar bay using boarding umbilicals that extended like the tongues of serpents. The Republic vessel's internal atmosphere sensors detected the seal, confirmed pressure, and signaled green. The hangar bay was a study in controlled tension. 24 clone troopers of the 501st Legion stood in formation, their blue-marked armor pristine despite the recent battle. Heavy repeating blasters were positioned on tripods at strategic angles, manned by specialists who could reduce the boarding zone to a kill box in seconds. Behind them, 6 Jedi stood in a loose semicircle: Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka Tano, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, and Ayla Secura. Their lightsabers remained clipped to their belts, but their hands rested near them with the casual readiness of warriors who had faced death 1,000 times. The boarding umbilical's door hissed open with a mechanical shriek that suggested its mechanisms were intentionally designed to unsettle. What emerged made several clones tighten their grips on their weapons. The first figure stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, encased in power armor that made clone trooper gear look like children's toys. Crimson ceramite plates were adorned with purity seals, strips of parchment covered in script and held by wax stamps bearing skull motifs. The helmet was a skull-faced nightmare, eye lenses glowing with sickly green luminescence. In one massive gauntlet, the figure carried a bolter, a weapon that resembled a small cannon more than a rifle. The other hand gripped a power maul that crackled with barely restrained energy. Behind the armored giant came 9 more figures, each distinctive and horrifying in their own way. 3 wore robes of black and red, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like elongated skulls. Mechadendrite tentacles writhed from their backs, cybernetic appendages tipped with tools, weapons, and sensors that clicked and whirred with insect-like persistence. 4 more wore carapace armor of a lighter design, bearing heraldry that featured skulls, eagles, and flaming swords. They carried weapons that resembled heavy stubbers and shotguns, their every movement coordinated with military precision. But it was the 10th figure that drew every Jedi's immediate attention. He was human, at least appeared to be, wearing armor of black and silver beneath a greatcoat that swept to his ankles. His face was patrician, handsome in a cold way, with eyes that held the weight of centuries and absolute certainty. At his hip hung a power sword. In his left hand, he carried a staff topped with the same skull and eagle motif they'd seen on every ship in this hostile fleet. But it was what hung around his neck that made Ahsoka's breath catch. An inquisitorial rosette. The symbol gleamed with authority that transcended law. It spoke of power to condemn worlds, execute billions, and answer to no authority but the highest echelons of a government the Republic didn't yet understand. The man stepped forward, his boots ringing against the deck plating. When he spoke, his voice carried the refined accent of aristocracy, sharpened by martial authority. I am Inquisitor Covenant of the Ordo Xenos, servant of the God Emperor of mankind, and bearer of his most holy warrant. His eyes swept across the assembled Jedi and clones with the detached assessment of a man evaluating livestock. You will identify yourselves, explain your presence in Imperial space, and submit to immediate interrogation. Resistance will be met with summary execution. Compliance may earn you a cleaner death. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Obi-Wan Kenobi stepped forward, his hands visible and empty, his expression carefully neutral. "I am Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Galactic Republic. We are stranded here due to a catastrophic hyperspace accident. We mean no intrusion and seek only peaceful contact and assistance in returning to our home territory." Inquisitor Covenant's expression didn't change. The Galactic Republic, hyperspace, Jedi. He pronounced each word as if tasting poison. "You speak of concepts and organizations unknown to the Imperium of man. Your vessels bear Xenos design paradigms. Your soldiers are clones, abominations against human purity. And you..." His gaze fixed on Obi-Wan with sudden, terrible intensity. "You reek of witchcraft. I sense the taint of the warp upon you, Psyker. You and all your kind." Anakin's hand moved toward his lightsaber. Around the hangar, clone troopers tensed. The armored giant in crimson raised his bolter slightly, a minute adjustment that nevertheless promised instant violence. But Obi-Wan remained still, his voice calm. "I don't know what a psyker is in your terminology, Inquisitor. But if you're referring to our connection to the Force, then yes. We Jedi are sensitive to an energy field that binds all living things together. We use it to maintain peace and protect the innocent." "Peace?" Covenant's lip curled. "There is no peace among the stars. There is only war. And the energy field you describe is the Imperium, the warp, the realm of chaos and damnation. You are witches, and by the authority granted to me by the Golden Throne, I find you all guilty of heresy, Xenos collaboration, and corruption by the ruinous powers." He raised his staff. "You have one chance at redemption. Surrender yourselves to the Inquisition, submit to psychic examination and purification, renounce your false republic, and swear allegiance to the God Emperor of mankind. Do this, and your deaths may be quick." Anakin's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss that cut through the tension like a blade through flesh. The blue plasma blade cast dancing shadows across the hangar. "How about a counteroffer? You leave our ship, we go our separate ways, and nobody has to die today." Inquisitor Covenant smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Foolish Xenos witch. You've already chosen damnation." He lowered his staff, and the galaxy's two most zealous warrior traditions stared at each other across 10 meters of deck plating, separated by incompatible ideologies and the absolute certainty that their cause was righteous. In that moment, the Republic learned the second lesson of the 41st millennium. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, no diplomatic solution. There was only the choice between submission and war. And the Jedi did not kneel. The hangar bay held its breath for one crystalline moment. Then Inquisitor Covenant's hand moved toward his power sword, and the galaxy learned what happened when the Jedi Order met the Imperium of man. Anakin moved first. The Force sang through him as he launched forward, his lightsaber carving a blue arc toward the Inquisitor. But Covenant was no ordinary human. Decades of combat against heretics, demons, and Xenos had honed his reflexes to superhuman levels. His power sword cleared its scabbard in a blur of motion, its disruption field flaring to life with a shriek of tortured air molecules. The weapons met with a sound like thunder trapped in a bottle. Lightsaber and power sword locked, energy screaming against each other in a contest of incompatible technologies. Anakin's eyes widened fractionally. He'd expected the blade to shear through the sword like it did everything else. Instead, the power weapon's disruption field created a barrier that deflected the lightsaber's plasma containment, forcing both weapons to slide against each other rather than cut through. Fascinating. Covenant hissed through gritted teeth. Your witchcraft manifests in solid form. The Mechanicus will enjoy vivisecting you to discover how. The moment of single combat shattered as the rest of the hangar erupted into violence. The crimson-armored giant, a tempester for the Inquisitor's stormtrooper retinue, opened fire with his bolter. The weapon roared like a chainsaw made of thunder, spitting mass-reactive shells designed to penetrate armor and detonate inside the target. The first 3 rounds caught a clone trooper in the chest, and the Republic soldiers simply exploded in a spray of armor fragments and biological matter. "Take cover!" Commander Cody's voice cut through the chaos as clone troopers dove behind crates and weapon emplacements. DC-15 blasters opened up in coordinated volleys, blue plasma bolts lancing across the hangar. They struck the Tempester's armor and splashed harmlessly against blessed ceramite that had survived far worse. But the clones were nothing if not adaptable. The heavy, repeating blaster positions opened fire, concentrating their streams on single targets. One of the stormtroopers caught a sustained burst and went down. His carapace armor cracked, blood leaking from the joints. The clones had learned their first lesson: concentrated fire on weak points. The 3 tech priests moved with inhuman coordination, their mechadendrites whipping out to deflect blaster bolts while shoulder-mounted weapon systems deployed. Plasma casters spat white-hot death across the hangar. A clone trooper screamed as superheated gas melted through his armor and the flesh beneath. Another managed to dodge, only to be caught by a mechadendrite tipped with a spinning circular saw that carved through his helmet with horrific efficiency. The Jedi entered the battle like a force of nature. Obi-Wan's lightsaber ignited mid-leap, the blue blade intercepting bolter rounds in mid-flight. The mass-reactive shells detonated against the plasma blade, creating a staccato rhythm of explosions. He landed between a cluster of clones and one of the tech priests, his blade moving in the defensive kata of Soresu, the most defensive of all lightsaber forms, perfected over years of protecting others. "Fall back to secondary positions," he commanded, deflecting a plasma burst that would have vaporized a clone sergeant. "Coordinate your fire." Ahsoka moved like water, her twin lightsabers, green and yellow-green, spinning in Jarkai's dual-blade style. She was smaller, faster, and more acrobatic than the heavily armored inquisitorial troops. A stormtrooper aimed a shotgun at her center mass. She vaulted over the blast, used the force to wrench the weapon from his hands, and brought both blades down in a scissor strike that carved through his armor at the joints. Kit Fisto laughed. Actually laughed, as he engaged 2 stormtroopers simultaneously, his smile never fading, even as bolter rounds forced him into a whirling dance of deflection. The Nautilon Jedi Master had fought in the Clone Wars' most brutal campaigns, and his combat style reflected it. Aggressive, unpredictable, and absolutely relentless. Aayla Secura reached out with the Force and pulled. One of the tech priests suddenly flew backward, his mechadendrites flailing as he lost contact with the deck. She slammed him into a bulkhead with enough force to crack his augmetic chassis, then pivoted to deflect a burst of bolter fire aimed at Rex's position. Plo Koon stood like a pillar in the storm's center, his lightsaber moving with minimal wasted motion. But it was his mastery of electric judgment, a force technique that generated lightning without drawing on the dark side, that turned the tide in his immediate vicinity. Arcs of energy leapt from his fingertips, earthing themselves in the tech priest's augmetics and causing their systems to spasm and shut down. And in the center of it all, Anakin Skywalker fought Inquisitor Covenant in a duel that would have been worthy of legend in either galaxy. Covenant was good. Perhaps the finest swordsman Anakin had faced since Count Dooku. His power sword wove patterns of disruption field energy, each strike calculated to exploit openings, test defenses, and probe for weakness. He fought with the cold precision of a man who had killed hundreds in single combat and expected to kill hundreds more. But Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one, and the Force flowed through him like a raging river. His lightsaber became a blue blur, transitioning from Form V's aggressive strikes to Former V's acrobatic attacks to Form 2's precision thrusts in fluid combination. He used the Force to enhance his speed, his strength, his perception, reading Covenant's intentions before they became actions, striking at vulnerabilities before they opened. The Inquisitor's eyes widened fractionally as Anakin's boot caught him in the chest. A Force-enhanced kick that sent him sliding backward. "You fight like a demon," Covenant snarled, recovering his stance. "That power is corruption. The warp has already claimed you." "I don't know what the warp is," Anakin replied, pressing his attack. "But the Force isn't corruption. It's life itself." "Lies." Covenant's power sword carved upward in a strike that would have disemboweled a normal opponent. Anakin twisted aside, his mechanical hand catching the Inquisitor's wrist. Servos whined as he squeezed, feeling the armor creak. Then something changed. Anakin felt it through the Force, a presence focusing on the battle. Not one of the Jedi, not even the strange, twisted sensation of the warp. Something else. Something vast and old, and utterly inimical to anything living. It pressed against his consciousness like a weight, and for just an instant, his concentration wavered. Covenant struck like a viper. His power sword slashed across Anakin's ribs, the disruption field burning through Jedi robes and scoring the armor beneath. Pain flared white-hot, and Anakin stumbled backward, his lightsaber coming up defensively. "The Emperor protects," Covenant intoned, advancing. "And through his will, all Xenos shall—" A blue bolt struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Commander Cody stood 10 meters away, his DC-15 still raised. "Hey!" the clone commander shouted. "Nobody hurts the general." Before Covenant could respond, the Tempestor in crimson armor grabbed a thermal detonator from his belt and hurled it toward the clone positions. The device arced through the air, its blinking timer counting down from 5 seconds. Obi-Wan's hand snapped out. The Force gripped the detonator mid-flight and hurled it back toward the boarding umbilical. It detonated just inside the entrance, the explosion tearing through 2 stormtroopers and collapsing part of the docking collar. "Inquisitor!" one of the surviving stormtroopers called out. "The umbilical is compromised. We need to withdraw." Covenant's face twisted with rage. But centuries of experience tempered his fury with tactical assessment. They were outnumbered. The Jedi were more formidable than anticipated, and the clone soldiers fought with discipline that matched the Imperial Guard. This was a battle they could win, but at a cost that would leave him without sufficient forces to properly contain these Xenos. "Fall back," he commanded. "Seal the umbilical behind us." The Inquisitorial forces retreated in good order, their weapons never ceasing fire as they withdrew through the damaged boarding tube. The Tempestor was the last through, his bolters spitting explosive rounds that kept the clones pinned until the inner door began to cycle shut. Inquisitor Covenant stood in the doorway, his power sword still active, blood leaking from where Cody's shot had penetrated his armor. His eyes found Anakin's across the smoke-filled hangar. "This is not over, Witch. The Imperium has scoured 1,000,000 worlds of Xenos filth. Your Republic will burn just the same. When we return, it will be with battle barges and extermination fleets. The God Emperor's judgment is absolute, and you have been found wanting." The door sealed with a hiss of hydraulics. Moments later, The umbilical detached and the inquisitorial cutter's engines flared as it pulled away from the Resolute. The hangar bay fell silent, except for the groans of wounded and the crackle of small fires. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber and immediately went to check on his troops. 6 clones were dead, vaporized by plasma or torn apart by bolter rounds. Another dozen were wounded, some critically. The medical teams were already rushing in with repulsor stretchers and emergency bacta. Obi-Wan approached, his face grim. "We need to leave this system immediately. Once that Inquisitor reports back, they'll return with overwhelming force." "Hyperdrive's still offline," Anakin replied, pressing a hand to his burned ribs. "Engineering estimates 3 days minimum for repairs, and that's assuming the damage isn't worse than we think. Then we have 3 days to understand what we've gotten ourselves into." Obi-Wan looked at the sealed doorway where their enemies had retreated. "Did you feel it during the fight? That presence?" "Yeah." Anakin's jaw clenched. Something was watching us. Something that made the Separatists' worst atrocities look like mercy. Ahsoka joined them, her lightsabers already clipped back to her belt. "Masters, I've never felt anything like that in the Force. It was like hunger, just pure, endless hunger for suffering and death." Plo Koon approached, his breathing mask hissing thoughtfully. The man, this Inquisitor, spoke of the warp and chaos as if they were established facts of his reality. He saw our connection to the Force as corruption, as witchcraft to be purged. These people aren't just hostile. They're ideologically opposed to the very concept of what we are. "Then we need information," Obi-Wan decided. "Kit, Isla, take a team and salvage what you can from the debris field. Look for intact computer cores, data storage, anything that might tell us about this Imperium of man. Plo, I need you to meditate on what you sensed during the battle. If there's something in this galaxy that corrupts Force users, we need to understand it before it corrupts us." "And what about the Inquisitor?" Anakin asked. "He said they'd come back with fleets. How long do we have?" As if in answer, the Resolute's long-range sensors began pinging alerts. Commander Cody's voice echoed through the ship's internal comms. "General Skywalker, you need to see this. Sensors are detecting multiple warp signatures at the edge of the system. They're not moving toward us yet, but..." His voice trailed off, with the uncertainty of a soldier reporting something his training hadn't prepared him for. Anakin and Obi-Wan rushed to the bridge. The tactical display showed a dozen new contacts emerging from what the sensors could only describe as tears in reality itself. The cathedral ships were returning, and they'd brought reinforcements. But more concerning was the silhouette at the formation's center, a vessel so large it made the others look like escort fighters. It was kilometers long, its mass equivalent to a small moon, and every centimeter bristled with weapons batteries that could reduce planets to slag. "Force, help us," Anakin whispered. "Is that a battle station?" "No," Obi-Wan replied, his voice hollow. "I think that's a standard capital ship in this galaxy, and it's heading our way." On the bridge of the Divine Mandate, Captain Hoth received the Inquisitor's report with appropriate gravity. Xenos with witchcraft that manifested as blade weapons. Clone soldiers that fought with inhuman coordination. And vessels that, while damaged, showed technological sophistication that suggested a civilization capable of warp-adjacent travel. Inquisitor Covenant recommends immediate extermination, Hoth's first officer reported. He's calling for a full exterminatus protocol once we've secured their vessels for Mechanicus examination. Hoth nodded slowly. "Tell the fleet to form a blockade formation around the debris field. Nothing gets in or out, and signal the righteous fury. Inform Lord Admiral Crastus that we have a Xenos incursion that requires his personal attention. The first officer saluted and moved to comply. Hoth returned his attention to the tactical display, where the Xenos vessels hid among the corpses of a world the Imperium had already killed once. They would not escape. The net was closing, and soon the God Emperor's justice would be absolute. In the 41st millennium, there was only war. And the Republic had just learned that mercy was a concept this galaxy had forgotten 10,000 years ago. The Resolute's meditation chamber had survived the battle intact. A small mercy in a galaxy that seemed to offer none. Obi-Wan Kenobi sat cross-legged on the deck plating, his breathing slow and measured, reaching out with the Force to understand the metaphysical landscape of this hostile reality. What he found terrified him more than any Sith Lord ever had. The Force was there, as it always had been. The luminous energy field that connected all living things, flowing through the galaxy in currents of light and shadow. But here, in this place, something else coexisted with it. The warp, as the Inquisitor had called it. It pressed against the Force like oil mixing with water, never quite blending but impossible to fully separate. Where the Force reflected the balance of life and death, growth and decay. The warp screamed with the concentrated emotions of countless sentient beings. Fear, rage, despair, hope, love, hatred. All of it churned together in a psychic maelstrom that defied comprehension. And swimming in that maelstrom were things, presences, entities that had never been alive, could never die, and hungered for the suffering of mortals with an appetite that transcended mere malice. One of those presences had noticed him during the battle. It watched him still. Obi-Wan opened his eyes, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chamber's controlled temperature. "By the Force," he whispered. "What kind of galaxy is this?" The door hissed open. Plo Koon entered, his Kel-Dor features unreadable behind his breathing mask. But his presence in the Force radiated deep concern. "You felt them too," he said. It wasn't a question. "Them?" Obi-Wan stood, his joints protesting slightly. "How many are there?" "I cannot be certain. At least 4 major presences, perhaps more. They exist in that other realm, the warp. But their attention bleeds through into normal space, wherever strong emotions manifest." Plo Koon moved to the viewport, staring out at the debris field beyond. "Master Kenobi, I believe we have encountered something the Jedi Order has never prepared for. The Sith draw on the dark side, yes, but they are still mortal. These entities, they are the dark side given consciousness and form. They are evil, not beings who have fallen to it." Before Obi-Wan could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "All Jedi to the conference room immediately. We've recovered something from the debris field." The conference room was crowded with the Republic's leadership. Anakin stood at the head of the table, his burned ribs bandaged beneath his robes. Commander Cody and Captain Rex represented the clone forces. Kit Fisto and Ayla Secura had just returned from their salvage operation, and between them on the table sat a battered but functional data storage device, recovered from what had once been an Imperial administrative center. "We pulled this from a hab block that still had partial power," Kit Fisto explained, his ever-present smile dimmed by what he'd seen. "It's some kind of historical archive. The language is Low Gothic. The translator's been working overtime to process it. What we've learned." He trailed off, looking to Ayla. The Twi'lek Jedi Master activated the device. A holographic display flickered to life, showing text and images that the Republic's systems had done their best to translate. What emerged was a history lesson that redefined the scale of horror. This galaxy is dominated by an entity called the Imperium of Man, Isla began. A human supremacist empire that spans 1,000,000 worlds and has existed for over 10,000 years. It's ruled by something called the God Emperor, a being they worship as divine who sits on a throne on their capital world, Terra. According to these records, the Emperor has been dead. No, not dead. Dying. For 10 millennia. Sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 human psychers every day. The silence in the room was absolute. 1,000 psychers, Ahsoka repeated slowly, every single day. For 10,000 years. That's 365 million people, Rex calculated, his voice flat with shock. Sacrificed to keep one being alive. It gets worse, Kit Fisto said quietly. The Imperium doesn't just dominate human space. They exterminate anything non-human on sight. Aliens, they call them Xenos, are considered abominations to be purged. There's no negotiation, no coexistence, just extermination. This debris field we're hiding in, it was a world called Typhon Primaris. Population, 6 billion. The Imperium declared it corrupted by chaos and used something called virus bombs to kill every living thing on the planet in a matter of hours. 6 billion, Obi-Wan said softly, and they just erased them. According to the records, it's standard procedure, Isla continued. They call it exterminatus. If a world is deemed too corrupted, too compromised, or too dangerous to reclaim, they destroy it utterly. The archives list hundreds of worlds that have received this sentence. Entire populations, billions of people, reduced to lifeless rocks because the Imperium decided they weren't worth saving. Anakin's mechanical hand clenched on the table's edge, leaving finger-shaped dents in the metal. And this chaos they keep talking about? Isla manipulated the display, bringing up religious texts and inquisitorial reports. It's complicated. Chaos refers to malevolent entities that exist in the warp, the dimension they use for faster-than-light travel. These entities feed on emotions and can possess people, corrupt entire worlds. The Imperium's paranoia about psychers, about witchcraft, stems from the very real danger that psychically sensitive individuals can become doorways for these entities. Plo Koon stepped forward. I have meditated on what we sensed during the battle. I believe these chaos entities are what I felt watching us. They exist in the warp, but they are drawn to psychic activity, to strong emotions. And Jedi with our connection to the Force? He paused. We shine like beacons to them. Every time we use the Force, especially in combat or under stress, we draw their attention. So the Inquisitor was right? Ahsoka's voice was small. We are corrupted just by existing in this galaxy? No, Obi-Wan said firmly. The Force is not the warp, even though they occupy similar metaphysical space. But we must be extraordinarily careful. The emotions we feel, the techniques we use, everything that involves drawing on the Force could potentially attract unwanted attention from these chaos entities. Then we can't use the Force? Anakin's voice rose. That's like asking us to stop breathing. The Force is part of who we are. I'm not saying we can't use it, Obi-Wan replied. But we need to understand the rules of this galaxy. The Sith draw on anger and hatred, emotions that feed the dark side. Here, those same emotions feed something far worse. We need to be mindful, centered, and avoid emotional extremes. Commander Cody cleared his throat. With respect, generals, we have a more immediate problem. Engineering reports that the hyperdrive damage is worse than initially assessed. Some kind of exotic radiation from our transition into this reality has fused components at the molecular level. Even with spare parts, we're looking at 2 weeks minimum for repairs. We don't have 2 weeks, Rex added, gesturing to the tactical display. Those cathedral ships have established a full blockade around the debris field. They're not attacking, but they're not leaving either. They're waiting for something. As if summoned by his words, the ship's alert klaxons began wailing. All eyes turned to the tactical display as a new contact appeared at the system's edge. It was a vessel that defied comprehension, not because of its size, though it dwarfed even the largest Venator-class destroyer, but because of what it represented. Where the cathedral ships combined religious architecture with military function, this vessel was a weapon that happened to have a church built into it. Kilometers of armor plating bristled with weapon batteries, macro cannons the size of skyscrapers, lance arrays that could slice through moons, torpedo tubes that could deploy warheads capable of cracking continental plates. Emperor's bones, Cody whispered, forgetting himself. The phrase had slipped from his vocabulary after hearing it used by their enemies. That's not a ship. That's a flying fortress. It's a battleship, Isla corrected, reading from the archive data. An Apocalypse-class battleship, according to these schematics. They form the backbone of Imperial Navy battle groups. It carries a crew of Force Preserve Us, 150,000 personnel. Its void shields can withstand sustained fire from entire fleets. And its weapons have enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. The battleship's name was emblazoned along its prow in high Gothic script 10 meters tall, Righteous Fury. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. The transmission is being broadcast on all frequencies. It's a demand for surrender. They're giving us 1 hour to power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. If we refuse, they'll open fire. Anakin looked to Obi-Wan. Master, we can't fight that. Even at full strength with our entire fleet, we'd be outgunned, and we're already damaged. Agreed. Obi-Wan stared at the display, his mind racing through scenarios. Surrender meant interrogation, likely torture, and almost certain execution. The Inquisitor had made that clear. But fighting was suicide. Running was impossible with their hyperdrive offline and a full blockade in place. There might be another option, Kit Fisto said slowly. The archives mention other factions in this galaxy. The Imperium doesn't control everything. There are other human empires, alien civilizations, even human rebels who've broken away from Imperial control. The enemy of our enemy, Isla added. If we could make contact with someone who opposes the Imperium, they might be willing to help us. Or at least, they might be less likely to execute us on sight. The archives list several major Xenos races, Kit continued. The Eldar, an ancient, psychically gifted species. The Tau, a younger civilization that practices something called the greater good and actually allows limited cooperation with non-Tau species. The Orcs, he paused. Actually, let's skip the Orcs. They seem to just want to fight everything. How do we contact any of them? Anakin demanded. We're blockaded, damaged, and on a timer. Ahsoka, who had been studying the tactical display intently, suddenly straightened. The blockade isn't complete. Look at the debris field's density here. She highlighted a section where the remains of Typhon Primaris's orbital stations created a maze of shattered metal and frozen corpses. The Imperial ships are maintaining position outside the densest areas, probably worried about collisions. But the Resolute is smaller, more maneuverable. if we could navigate through there. We'd still be visible on their sensors, Cody objected. Not if we powered down everything except life support and maneuvering thrusters, Anakin countered, catching on to Ahsoka's plan. Minimal energy signature, obscured by all that debris. It's insane, but it might work. And where would we go? Obi-Wan asked. Even if we slip the blockade, we're still trapped in this system. Ayla manipulated the archive display, bringing up stellar cartography. According to these records, there's a Tau outpost 3 systems away. It's listed as a border world, one of the edges of their territory. If we could reach it on sublight drives, that would take months, Rex protested. We could manage it in 3 weeks if we pushed the engines to maximum, Cody calculated. Uncomfortable, resource-intensive, but possible. Plo Koon's breathing mask hissed thoughtfully. It's a tremendous risk. We know nothing about these Tau except what Imperial propaganda tells us. They could be just as hostile. But they're not the Imperium, Anakin said. And right now, anyone who opposes these religious fanatics is worth the gamble. I say we try it. All eyes turned to Obi-Wan. As the senior Jedi present, the decision ultimately rested with him. He looked at the tactical display, at the righteous fury waiting to deliver the Imperium's judgment, at the maze of debris that represented 6 billion lives extinguished in the name of purity. How long until the hour is up? He asked. 42 minutes, the communications officer replied. Then we have 42 minutes to prepare. Commander Cody, begin powering down all non-essential systems. Route everything to engines and maneuvering thrusters. Helm, plot the most convoluted course through that debris field you can manage. Navigation, I need coordinates for the Tau border world. General, Rex stepped forward. The men should know what we're attempting. This is going to be dangerous. Obi-Wan nodded. Tell them the truth, Captain. Tell them we're running from an enemy that outnumbers and outguns us, toward allies who may not exist, through a graveyard of billions. Tell them the Jedi will do everything in our power to see them home safely. And tell them... He paused, remembering the clone trooper who had been vaporized by that first bolter round. The boy, because that's what he'd been, despite his accelerated aging, just a boy, had died protecting others, just like every clone who had fallen since they'd arrived in this nightmare. Tell them that the Republic hasn't abandoned them. We will find a way home. On my honor as a Jedi, we will find a way home. The clones saluted as one, fists to chests, the gesture carrying absolute faith in their Jedi commanders. As the bridge crew scrambled to prepare, Anakin pulled Obi-Wan aside. Master, there's something I need to tell you. During the fight with the Inquisitor, when I felt that presence watching us, it didn't just watch. It spoke to me. Obi-Wan's expression grew grave. What did it say? It told me that anger could make me strong, that the power I needed to protect everyone was within reach if I just stopped holding back. Anakin's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Master, it knew exactly what to say. It knew my fears, my frustrations, everything. It was like it had been watching me my whole life, waiting for this moment. That's how chaos works, Plo Koon said quietly, having overheard. It offers you exactly what you want, wrapped in the illusion of righteousness. You must not listen, young Skywalker. The power it offers comes at a price no one should pay. Anakin nodded, but Obi-Wan could see the shadow in his former Padawan's eyes. The whisper of chaos had found fertile ground in Anakin's perpetual struggle with fear and attachment. And in this galaxy where the dark side had poisonous allies, That whisper might prove more dangerous than any Sith's manipulation. "Time's up," the communications officer announced. "The righteous fury is broadcasting again. They're demanding our immediate response." "Ignore them," Obi-Wan commanded. "Begin the maneuver. All hands, brace for evasive action." The Resolute's engines flared to life, pushing the Star Destroyer deeper into the debris field. Behind them, the Prosecutor and Defender followed, their hulls already scraping against tumbling wreckage. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Lord Admiral Kraestus watched the Xenos vessels attempt their escape with cold amusement. "They refuse to surrender," his first officer reported. "Then they choose death. Signal the fleet, weapons free. Destroy them." The Imperium's wrath descended like a hammer of righteousness, and the Republic's survivors learned that in the 41st millennium, there was no escape from the God Emperor's judgment. Only the slim hope that somewhere in this galaxy of endless war, someone might value diplomacy over destruction. The Resolute shuddered as a lance beam from the Righteous Fury carved a glowing trench through the debris field where the Star Destroyer had been moments before. The sheer scale of the Imperial battleship's weaponry defied reason. Each shot contained enough energy to power a small world. "They're not just trying to hit us," Anakin shouted over the groaning of stressed Durasteel, his hands flying across the helm console. "They're trying to collapse the debris field around us." He was right. Macro cannon shells the size of ATTEs detonated against larger pieces of wreckage, sending shrapnel storms of molten metal and frozen corpses cascading toward the Republic ships. The Resolute's shields flared under the onslaught, their energy draining at an alarming rate. "Shields at 60% and falling," a clone officer reported. "A direct hit will breach the hull." Obi-Wan stood firm at the command station, his voice a bastion of calm in the storm. "Helm, take us deeper into the wreckage of the orbital plate. Use the largest fragments for cover. All power to forward deflectors." The Star Destroyer banked sharply, its sublight engines screaming in protest as it threaded a needle between the shattered remains of a starport and the crumpled spine of a defense monitor. The Prosecutor and Defender followed in its wake, their smaller profiles allowing them to navigate the treacherous path with slightly more ease. "They're launching attack craft," Ahsoka called out from the sensor station. "Dozens of them. Configuration matches Imperial Navy Fury interceptors. They're smaller and more agile. They can follow us in here." On the view screen, swarms of angular, aggressive-looking fighters poured from the battleship's launch bays, their engines burning with hellish red light. They moved with a coordination that was chilling, weaving through the debris with unnatural synchronicity. "Launch all remaining ARC-170s, Anakin ordered. "Have them form a defensive screen. They're to buy us time, not win the battle." The Resolute's own hangar bays, one still sealed from the earlier damage, disgorged the Republic's starfighters. The twin-seated ARC-170s, with their powerful laser cannons and rear-mounted gunner positions, were formidable craft, but they were outnumbered and facing opponents whose design philosophy was utterly alien. The dogfight that erupted within the graveyard of Typhon Primaris was a chaotic ballet of death. Blue and red laser fire crisscrossed the void, punctuated by the brighter, more sustained beams of the Fury Interceptor's less cannons. An ARC-170 caught a direct hit and disintegrated, its pilot and gunner lost before they could eject. A Fury Interceptor flew too close to a tumbling plasma conduit and was vaporized in the resulting explosion. "We can't keep this up," Cody stated, his voice grim as he watched the casualty report stream in. "We're losing fighters at a 3-to-1 ratio. Their craft are tougher than they look." Anakin's mind raced analyzing the patterns of the Imperial assault. They were methodical, relentless, and utterly without mercy. But they were also predictable. Their formations were rigid, their attack patterns following a set doctrine. It was a weakness he could exploit. "Obi-Wan, they're hurting us," Anakin said, his eyes fixed on the tactical hologram. "They're using the attack craft to push us toward a kill zone, that clearing near the wreck of the Hive City spire. The big ships are positioning themselves to enfilade that position." Obi-Wan saw it immediately. The Imperial commander was a tactician of the highest order, using his smaller craft as beaters to drive prey into the sights of the hunters. It was a classic maneuver, executed on a terrifying scale. "Then we must not go there," Obi-Wan replied. "We need to break the pattern. Ahsoka, do you still have that navigational fix on the Tau outpost?" "Yes, Master. But we'll have to punch through a section of the blockade to make the jump to sublight transit." "Then that is what we will do." Obi-Wan turned to the command crew, his presence radiating authority and resolve. "All ships, prepare for a full power engine burn on my mark. We will use the wreck of the orbital defense laser as a screen. Anakin, I need you to calculate the exact moment we break cover. We will have one chance." As the orders were relayed, a new presence made itself known on the bridge. A clone communications officer looked up from his console, his face pale. "Sirs, we're receiving a new transmission. It's not Imperial. The origin point is inside the debris field." A crackle of static filled the bridge, followed by a voice that was melodious yet sharp with an ancient, weary intelligence. The language was alien, but the ship's translator, having been fed volumes of Imperial data, struggled to parse it. "Not foolish children playing in a tomb. The Maquis have you cornered. Your death is a certainty if you remain." Obi-Wan and Anakin exchanged a look of pure astonishment. "Identify yourself," Obi-Wan commanded. "We are the Asuryani," the voice replied, the name translating roughly to "those of the bloodline." The archives had called them Eldar. "We have watched your clumsy arrival and your futile struggle. You shine with a psychic light unlike anything we have seen, untainted by the primordial annihilator. It is intriguing. Can you help us?" Anakin cut in, his pragmatism overriding protocol. "Help is a transaction, not a gift," the Eldar voice responded, laced with condescension. "The she who thirsts hungers for your souls, little lights. The Maquis will merely kill your bodies. We offer a path, but it requires a price." "What price?" Obi-Wan asked, his senses alert for deception. He could feel the being on the other end of the comm, a psychic signature so refined and potent it made most Jedi seem like novices. Yet it was tinged with a profound, galaxy-spanning sorrow. "You carry something. A resonance in the warp. No, in your force. A signature of pure space-time, unmarred by the great enemy's touch. We require a shard of this purity, a focus for our own arts. Grant us this, and we shall create a diversion that will allow your vessels to escape the Maquis' net." On the tactical display, a new set of contacts appeared. Sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to be crafted from wraithbone and dream. They moved with impossible grace, skimming the edges of the debris field, their presence ignored by the Imperial blockade as if they were ghosts. "They want a piece of the Force?" Ahsoka whispered, horrified. "That's not possible. It's an energy field, not a substance." "For them, perhaps it is," Plo Koon mused, having joined them on the bridge. "Their understanding of the metaphysical is clearly different from our own. but can we trust them? The Imperial archives list the Eldar as manipulative and treacherous. Isla Secura warned, they are said to sacrifice entire human worlds to save a handful of their own. And the Imperium sacrifices worlds on a whim, Anakin countered. I don't trust them either, but they're offering us a way out. The Imperium is only offering death. Another violent shudder rocked the Resolute, as a near miss from the Righteous Fury's lances vaporized a continent-sized piece of debris nearby. We are out of time, Obi-Wan said. He made his choice. Eldar vessel, we agree to your terms. Create your diversion. The bargain is struck, the voice replied, and the comm link went dead. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, on the far side of the debris field, space itself seemed to tear open. A brilliant, sickly green wound bled into reality, and from it emerged madness. Shapes of impossible geometry and fluid horror poured forth, their very presence causing the Imperial vessels to break formation in alarm. Sirens and alarms blared across the Imperial fleet as they identified the new threat, a demonic incursion. By the Force, Kit Fisto breathed, his usually cheerful demeanor shattered. What have they done? They've opened a door to the warp, Plo Koon said, his voice heavy with dread. They've summoned chaos. The Imperial blockade dissolved into chaos. The cathedral ships turned their massive weapons batteries on the emerging demonic entities, their crews fighting a battle for their very souls. The Righteous Fury, caught between its prey and an existential threat, hesitated for a critical moment. Now, Obi-Wan commanded. The engines of the Resolute, the Prosecutor, and the Defender flared with their full power. The 3 Republic ships shot out from their hiding place, not toward the thinning blockade, but directly through the gap created by the Eldar's horrific diversion. They flew through a battlefield where reality itself was unraveling, where Imperial fighters were torn apart by claws of pure malice, and demonic entities were vaporized by sanctified macro-cannon shells. It was a vision of hell, a testament to the true nature of the galaxy they now inhabited. As they cleared the debris field and the horrors within, the sleek, graceful form of an Eldar ship fell into formation beside them for just a moment. A smaller craft, a shuttle of some kind, detached from the Resolute's hull. A piece of the ship's hyperdrive core infused with the unique signature of their transition through the Force, taken by the Eldar without anyone even noticing its removal. The transaction was complete. The Eldar ship vanished into the void as if it had never been, leaving the Republic fleet alone, battered, but free of the immediate blockade. Set course for the Tau border world, Obi-Wan ordered, his voice weary. Maximum sublight speed. As the stars stretched before them, Anakin stared at the tactical display, now clear of Imperial contacts. They had escaped. But the cost of their freedom was a deal with a faction that had willingly unleashed demons upon their enemies. They had traded a piece of their very essence for survival. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, Anakin could still feel the echo of that chaos whisper, promising him that next time he wouldn't need to run. 3 weeks of sublight travel through the void between systems was a profound exercise in tension and tedium. The Resolute and its 2 escort ships became isolated worlds, their crews living in the perpetual twilight of emergency lighting and rationed power. The initial relief of escaping the Typhon system curdled into a grinding anxiety as the reality of their situation set in. They were refugees in a hostile galaxy, fleeing toward a potential ally they knew only from Imperial propaganda. The Jedi took shifts in the meditation chamber, not for peace, but for vigilance. The presence that had whispered to Anakin during the battle had not vanished. It lingered at the edge of perception, a patient predator. Plo Koon theorized that their use of the Force during the escape, combined with the psychic shockwave of the Eldar's warp rift, had left a metaphysical scent on them. It was during one of these meditation shifts that the first incident occurred. Jedi Master Kit Fisto was leading a session with a group of clone troopers from the 501st, including Captain Rex. The Nautilan's calming presence was a balm to men bred for war, but now facing existential dread. He guided them through simple breathing exercises, encouraging them to find a center of peace amidst the uncertainty. Rex, his helmet off, found it surprisingly easy. The Jedi's techniques mirrored the focus drills the Kaminoans had programmed into them. He closed his eyes, following the rhythm of his own breath. And then he heard it. A voice, sibilant and cold, like oiled metal sliding against stone. It did not speak in words, but in sensations. It showed him a memory, the hangar bay on the Resolute. The Tempester's bolter roaring, the clone next to him, named Mixer, dissolving into a red mist. The voice twisted the memory. It wasn't a tragedy. It was an insult. It whispered that Mixer's death was meaningless, that the Jedi's caution had gotten him killed, that true strength lay in righteous fury, in the absolute certainty of retribution. Rex's eyes snapped open, his hand going to his DC-17 blaster pistol. He found Kit Fisto watching him, the Jedi's large black eyes filled with concern. "You felt it," Kit stated softly, his smile absent. "I heard something, sir," Rex admitted, his voice tight. "A thought that wasn't mine." "It is the taint of this place," Kit explained to the room, his voice grave. "It preys on your fears, your angers, your grief. You must recognize these thoughts as intruders. Acknowledge them, then let them pass. Do not engage. Do not feed them." The session ended with a more somber tone. The clones had faced physical horrors before, but this was an enemy that attacked from within, one their blasters were useless against. The problem was not confined to the meditation chamber. In the officers' mess, Commander Cody found himself in a heated argument with a lieutenant from the 212th over a trivial matter of resource allocation. The disagreement, which would normally have been resolved with a terse exchange and a datapad update, escalated into a shouting match that nearly came to blows before Cody, shaking, reined himself in. The lieutenant, pale and confused, couldn't explain his own fury. The atmosphere aboard the ships grew thick with a low-grade paranoia. Clone troopers who had fought side by side for years found themselves suspicious of each other. Minor technical failures were seen as sabotage. The constant dull thrum of the sublight engines, once a comforting sound, became a grating reminder of their isolation. Anakin Skywalker felt the pressure more than most. The whisper had a special fondness for him. It didn't just show him memories, it offered him solutions. "They are weak," the voice hissed in the back of his mind as he reviewed casualty reports. "Kenobi preaches patience while your men die. The code demands detachment while your wife..." Anakin slammed a mental door shut, sweat beading on his brow. He was in his quarters, trying to realign the servos in his mechanical hand. The voice had almost said her name. It knew about Padme. The violation was absolute. He sought out Obi-Wan, finding him in the ship's archives, cross-referencing the Imperial data with their own star charts. "It's getting worse," Anakin said without preamble, slumping into a chair opposite his former master. "The influence. It's not just watching anymore. It's speaking to the men, It's turning them against each other. Obi-Wan looked up, his face etched with fatigue. I know. Plo Koon reports the same. This chaos is a pathogen that travels on thought and emotion. Our very presence in the Force makes us carriers. The clones, for all their mental conditioning, are still human. They have fears and angers for it to exploit. So, what do? We can't just tell everyone to stop feeling anything. That's the whole problem with the Jedi Code. Anakin's frustration boiled over, and he felt the voice purr in approval at his anger. Obi-Wan's gaze was piercing. We must be examples, Anakin. We must demonstrate control. We must show them that while emotion is human, we are not slaves to it. We must be the calm in this storm, or we will all be lost to the tempest. Their conversation was interrupted by Ahsoka, who entered the archive with a determined look on her face. Masters, I think I've found something. A potential solution, or at least a stopgap. She activated a holoprojector, displaying a complex energy diagram. It's a Force technique, an old one from the archives on Ossus. It's a group meditation barrier, a circle of shelter. It doesn't block the Force, but it creates a shared psychic space of pure tranquility. It would require all the Jedi on board to maintain it around the clock. It would be mentally exhausting, but it might shield the crew from the worst of the warp's influence. Obi-Wan studied the diagram, a flicker of hope in his eyes. It's a tremendous risk. If one of us falls to the whispers while maintaining the circle, then the whole thing collapses, and the backlash could shatter our minds. Ahsoka finished. I know, but we're running out of options. The crew's morale is fracturing. Another week of this, and we might have a mutiny born from paranoia we ourselves invited. The decision was made. That evening, the 7 Jedi aboard the Resolute, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Aayla Secura, and the recently recovered Sayasi Teen, gathered in the main hangar bay. The clones were assembled before them, their confusion and low-grade anxiety a palpable fog in the Force. Obi-Wan did not lie to them. He explained the nature of the psychic threat, the danger of the warp, and the Jedi's plan to protect them. He spoke of trust and shared strength. Then, the Jedi formed a circle in the center of the hangar. They ignited their lightsabers, not as weapons, but as focuses, beacons of pure, disciplined energy. Blue, green, and the unique yellow of Plo Koon's blade cast the vast space in an ethereal light. As one, they reached into the Force. But this time it was different. Instead of reaching out, they drew in. They wove their consciousness together, not in a network of thought, but in a bastion of feeling. They focused on shared memories of peace, the serene halls of the Jedi Temple, the quiet beauty of Alderaan's mountains, the steadfast loyalty of the clones themselves. A visible shimmer began to form in the air around the hangar. A gentle, golden haze. The effect was immediate. The clone who had nearly fought Cody felt the knot of anger in his chest loosen and dissolve. Rex, standing at attention with his men, felt the cold, oily presence in his mind retreat with a hiss of frustration. A profound, collective sigh of relief passed through the hundreds of troopers present. The circle of shelter was holding, but the cost was immense. On the hangar deck, the Jedi stood as living conduits, their faces masks of concentration. Kit Fisto's smile was gone, replaced by a grimace of effort. Aayla Secura trembled slightly. Anakin, his connection to the Force, both his greatest strength and vulnerability, felt the whispers hammering at the edges of the circle, probing for a weakness, for his weakness. He saw flashes behind his eyes. Padme, dying in childbirth. Obi-Wan, looking at him with disappointment, a future where he was too weak to protect anyone. "Let the barrier fall," the voice cooed, its tone now almost reasonable. "Let them see your true power. You can protect them better than this fragile circle. You can forge an empire of safety, if only you would seize the means." Anakin's grip on his lightsaber tightened, his knuckles white. He met Obi-Wan's eyes across the circle. In his master's gaze, he saw not judgment, but shared burden, and a silent plea to hold fast. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. He would hold the line. For the next 2 weeks, the Jedi maintained their vigil in shifts, the circle of shelter becoming a permanent feature of life aboard the Resolute. The atmosphere cleared. The paranoia receded. The clones, protected from the psychic predation, began to function as the elite soldiers they were once more. They were a beacon of light in the Imperium, a tiny island of peace in a sea of madness. But as they finally entered the star system containing the Tau border world, and the circle was gently dissolved, the Jedi nearly collapsed from the strain. They had won a vital battle against the corruption of their new galaxy. But as the Resolute sensors detected the clean, geometric shapes of Tau patrol ships moving to intercept them, they knew a new test was about to begin. They had preserved their souls to make first contact. Now they had to hope that the philosophy of the greater good was more than just words. The Tau patrol craft were like nothing the Republic had ever seen. Sleek and angular, their white and gray hulls adorned with clean, symbolic markings, they moved with an efficiency that was almost sterile compared to the Gothic brutality of the Imperium or the organic grace of the Elder. They were small, but numerous, and they fanned out in a textbook-perfect interception pattern, their movements coordinated by a hive mind-like precision. Receiving a hailing frequency, the communications officer reported, his voice tinged with relief after weeks of silence and whispers. The translation matrix is adapting. It's remarkably clear. They're identifying themselves as the Tau Empire and requesting our identity and intentions. "Clear and direct," Obi-Wan observed. "A welcome change. Open a channel. Visual this time." The view screen shimmered to life, revealing a being that was humanoid, but distinctly alien. Its blue-gray skin was smooth, its face a single solid plate with no visible nose, and its eyes were large and dark. It wore a form-fitting uniform of white and gray, and when it spoke, its voice was calm and measured, devoid of the religious fervor or ancient malice they had encountered thus far. "I am Poroi El Soran, of the Tau Empire's Third Sphere Expansion Diplomatic Corps. You have entered the space of the Daleth Sept. Identify your vessels and state your purpose." Obi-Wan stepped forward, his hands open in a universal gesture of peace. "I am Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Galactic Republic. Our vessels are the Resolute, Prosecutor, and Defender. We are refugees, stranded in this galaxy by a catastrophic accident. We seek neither conflict nor territory, only sanctuary and the possibility of dialogue." The Tau officer, El Soran, tilted its head. "The Galactic Republic is not a polity in our records. Your vessel design is also unfamiliar. You claim to be from another galaxy?" The concept seemed to require a moment of processing. "This is an extraordinary claim." "We understand it must be," Obi-Wan replied, his tone patient and diplomatic. "We can provide sensor logs of our arrival, records of our first contact with the Imperium of Man, and evidence of the engagement that left us damaged and stranded. We are peaceful explorers, warriors only by necessity." On the bridge, Anakin watched the exchange intently. The Tau's reaction was a world apart from the Imperium's immediate condemnation. There was curiosity here, not blind hatred. It was a start. Elsoran conferred with someone off-screen for a moment before turning back. Your request for dialogue is noted. However, your vessels are armed and of significant tonnage. Standard protocol for unknown military assets requires an escort to a designated holding area where a full watercast delegation can meet with you. You will be required to power down your weapons and shields and submit to a remote scan of your vessels. Anakin's hand tightened on the command rail. Power down our shields? After what we just went through? They might as well ask us to strip naked and hand them our blasters. It is a reasonable precaution, Anakin, Obi-Wan said quietly, though he shared the concern. We are the unknown quantity here. They are being cautious, not hostile. We have their word, Ahsoka said, studying the Tau's body language through the view screen. They seem orderly. I don't sense deception, just procedure. After a brief, hushed discussion among the Jedi and clone commanders, Obi-Wan gave the order. Very well, Por-Ui Elsoran. We will comply with your protocols. We are transmitting our power-down sequence now. The journey to the designated moon, a barren rock orbiting a gas giant, was tense. The Tau patrol ships flanked them the entire way, their weapons never quite trained on the Republic vessels, but never quite pointing away either. As they entered orbit, a larger vessel, a Kroot war sphere, emerged from behind the moon. Its organic, almost biological design was a stark contrast to the clean Tau aesthetics, a reminder that this empire did, indeed, incorporate other species. The meeting took place in a prefabricated dome on the moon's surface. The Republic delegation consisted of Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Commander Cody. They were met by a trio of Tau. Elsoran was there, along with a taller Tau in more elaborate robes, a Porvra, or mid-level diplomat, named Korovan. The third was a Tau in a sleek, articulated battlesuit, its helmet off to reveal a stern, focused face. This was Shazvre Oran, their military liaison. The dome's interior was Spartan and functional. A holotable displayed stellar maps of the region, and the air was cool and recycled. Your story is remarkable, Korovan began, his voice smooth and persuasive. And the data you have provided checks out against our intelligence on Imperial movements in the Typhon sector. The Imperium of man is a blight upon the galaxy, a regime of ignorance and superstition that opposes the spread of the greater good. That you survived an encounter with them speaks to your resilience. We wish only to repair our ships and find a way home, Obi-Wan reiterated. In return for your assistance, we can offer technological and cultural exchange. We are skilled warriors, diplomats, and healers. Oran, the Firecast warrior, spoke, his voice a low rumble. Your Jedi abilities. You demonstrated them in your battle with the Imperium. You are Psychers? The question was loaded. The Imperial data had been clear on the Tau's deep suspicion of Psychers, whom they considered unstable and dangerous. We are not Psychers as you understand them, Anakin cut in, his tone firm. We use the Force, a natural energy field. We do not draw power from the warp, and we are not vulnerable to possession by the entities that dwell there. Korovan steepled his long fingers. A fascinating distinction, one our Earth-cast scientists would be very interested in studying. The greater good is a philosophy of progress and unity. All species have a place within it, contributing their strengths for the benefit of all. Your technology, your unique abilities, they could be a great boon to the Tauva. There it was, the offer. It wasn't the threat of extermination or the temptation of demonic power. It was an invitation to be assimilated. "We are not looking to join your empire," Obi-Wan said carefully. "We seek an alliance between sovereign powers, the Republic and the Tau Empire." Korovin's expression was polite but unyielding. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, Master Kenobi. The Imperium, the Orcs, the creatures of the warp. No single world or even a small coalition of worlds can stand against such threats for long. Survival, and indeed prosperity, lies in unity. The greater good is not a treaty to be signed. It is a truth to be embraced." The negotiations continued for hours. The Tau were impeccably polite, endlessly patient, and utterly inflexible. They offered generous terms, safe harbor, resources to repair their ships, even a protected world to settle on. But the price was always the same: integration into the Tau Empire. They would become clients of the Dalith Sept, their technology and force sensitives studied for the benefit of all. Their military forces integrated into the Tau military command structure for the common defense. As they took a recess, the Republic delegation gathered in an antechamber. "They don't want allies," Cody summarized grimly. "They want assets. They're just more polite about it than the Imperium. They see the universe through a single lens," Obi-Wan agreed. "The greater good. Anything that does not fit is either to be destroyed or absorbed. There's no room for equals." "But they're not trying to kill us," Ahsoka pointed out. "And they have the resources we need. Maybe we could agree to a temporary alliance, just long enough to get the hyperdrive fixed." Anakin shook his head, his frustration mounting. "And then what? You heard them. Study the Jedi. Integrate the clones. They'd never let us leave. This greater good is a cage with comfortable bars." He looked at Obi-Wan, a hard light in his eyes. "We can't do this, Master. We can't trade one master for another, no matter how polite they are." Obi-Wan knew he was right. The Jedi Code itself was about rejecting attachment to power, about serving a higher purpose, not being absorbed by a state ideology. To submit to the Tauva would be a betrayal of everything the Republic stood for. When they returned to the table, Obi-Wan delivered their decision. "We thank you for your hospitality and your offer, Porvre Korovin, but we must decline integration into the Tau Empire. We will accept your help as independent allies, or we will be on our way." Korovin's polite mask didn't slip, but a coldness entered his large dark eyes. "Oran," the warrior, shifted his stance almost imperceptibly. "That is unfortunate," Korovin said. "An isolated nomadic fleet of your capabilities, operating outside the Tauva, represents a significant destabilizing factor. You could be captured by the Imperium, your technology reverse-engineered. You could fall to the predations of chaos. The risks to the greater good are too great." The meaning was clear. They were not free to leave. Oran spoke, his hand moving to a comms device on his wrist. "Your vessels are currently being scanned by our orbital platforms. If you attempt to power your weapons or shields, they will be disabled. You will be escorted to a secure facility on Dalith itself, where this matter can be discussed further." It was a velvet-gloved capture. Anakin's face darkened. He looked at Obi-Wan, and in that look was a silent question and a ready answer. They had fought their way out of the Imperium's iron fist. They would not be quietly imprisoned by the Tau's open hand. Obi-Wan gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Then, I'm afraid we have a disagreement," Anakin said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. His mechanical hand, hidden beneath the table, made a subtle twisting motion. On the Resolute, sitting in the captain's chair, Captain Rex saw the prearranged signal flash on his private console. He didn't hesitate. All stations, condition 0. Power to weapons and shields, ignite engines, prepare to break orbit. The velvet glove tore. The Tau's polite diplomacy vanished, replaced by the iron will of the greater good. And the Jedi, who had sought peace, prepared for their second war in a foreign galaxy. The moon's surface erupted in a storm of ionized particles and coherent light. The Tau's response to the Republic's power-up was instantaneous and devastatingly precise. Pulse carbine fire from the Tau security teams outside the dome, stitched across the prefab structure not to destroy it, but to seal the exits with molten ceramite. Inside, the air filled with the snap hiss of lightsabers. Anakin's blue blade was the first to flare, deflecting a volley of plasma fire from the now hostile Shazvra Oran's battlesuit. The red plasma bolts sizzled against the blue energy, their impact far more potent and focused than a blaster's diffuse packet. "Fall back to the transport," Obi-Wan commanded, his own lightsaber a swirling shield as he covered Cody, who was returning fire with his DC-17s. The clone commander's blue-ringed bolts spattered against Oran's battlesuit armor, doing little more than scorching the paint. "The transport's surrounded," Ahsoka called out, her twin blades deflecting fire from 2 Tau fire warriors who had burst through a secondary entrance. Their disciplined, synchronized fire was a stark contrast to the chaotic fury of the Imperium. It was a calculated, efficient attempt to box them in. Anakin's eyes narrowed. The Tau were methodical. They fought like a machine, each warrior a cog in a perfect system. But machines had weak points. With a grunt of effort, he reached out with the Force not at the warriors, but at the dome's central support pillar. Metal shrieked as he wrenched it from its moorings, sending the entire structure collapsing inward in a controlled avalanche of plasteel and wiring. The sudden collapse broke the Tau's perfect firing lines. In the chaos of dust and falling debris, Anakin yelled, "Now!" To the left, through the service conduit Ahsoka marked. They moved as one, a unit forged in the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka formed a rearguard, their lightsabers creating an impenetrable wall of deflected plasma, while Anakin used the Force to clear a path, hurling chunks of debris at any Tau who tried to re-establish a firing position. Cody provided covering fire, his shots now aimed at joints and weapon systems with lethal accuracy. Above, the space around the moon became a killing field. The Tau patrol ships, true to their threat, had opened fire the moment the Resolute's shields flared. Their ion cannons lashed out, seeking to disable rather than destroy. But the Republic crews, though exhausted and battered, were veterans of a galaxy-spanning war. "Evasive pattern Delta 7, Rex barked from the Resolute's bridge. The Star Destroyer banked hard, its turbo lasers returning fire. The green lances of energy slammed into the lead Tau patrol craft. Its shields held, but flickered violently. The Tau's ships were agile, but their shields and armor were lighter, designed for hit-and-run tactics, not slugging matches with a capital ship. "The prosecutor is taking heavy fire on her port side," a sensor officer reported. "Tell them to stick close to the Defender. Concentrate fire on that cruiser emerging from the moon's shadow," Rex ordered, his mind a cool, tactical engine. He saw what the Tau were doing, herding them, trying to disable their engines with pinpoint ion fire. They wanted the technology intact. That was their weakness. They were unwilling to utterly destroy what they sought to acquire. "All batteries, target their engine clusters. They want our ship? Let's see them take it without thrusters." The Venators shifted their fire. their turbo lasers now focusing on the delicate propulsion systems of the Tau vessels. One patrol craft, its engines vaporized, spun helplessly into the dark. Another took a direct hit to its bridge and went silent. On the surface, the Republic shuttle screamed through the atmosphere, its wings shedding molten droplets from grazing pulse fire. Anakin wrestled with the controls, weaving through a canyon system as Tau skimmers pursued them. "We're not going to make it to the Resolute's hangar with that tail," Ahsoka warned, clutching her chair. "Then we're not going to the hangar," Anakin said, a wild, reckless glint in his eye. "Rex, we're coming in hot on the starboard flank. I need a distraction and an open ventral maintenance hatch." "Sir, that's a 1 in a million shot even for you," Cody protested from the co-pilot's seat. "Then it's a good thing I like those odds. Do it, Rex." Aboard the Resolute, Rex didn't hesitate. All portside batteries, sustained fire on that Kroot warsphere. Make them think we're making a break for it. Ventral maintenance, open hatch 7-9, and stand by with mag clamps and tractor beams. The Resolute poured fire toward the organic-looking warsphere, forcing it to raise its shields and maneuver. In that moment of diverted attention, Anakin pushed the shuttle's engines into the red. They shot upward, out of the canyon, directly at the Resolute's underbelly. The open maintenance hatch was a tiny, blinking light in a vast field of gray hull. Alarms blared in the shuttle, a Tau missile lock. Anakin didn't try to evade. He poured power to the forward deflectors. "Brace for impact!" The missile struck their rear shields just as they crossed the threshold. The shuttle lurched violently, its systems failing, but the Resolute's tractor beams and mag clamps seized it, hauling the crippled craft into the bay with a shriek of tortured metal. "All hands, secure for immediate jump to sublight." Rex's voice echoed through the ship. "All power to engines and forward shields. Punch us through." The 3 Republic ships, flying in a tight, mutually supportive formation, burned their engines at maximum emergency power. They rammed through the Tau cordon, sacrificing rear shields to concentrated pulse fire. The Defender took a brutal hit to its engine nacelle, venting plasma, but it held formation. They broke clear of the moon's gravity well and vanished into the void at sublight, leaving the baffled and frustrated Tau fleet behind. In the Resolute's medbay, the Jedi and clones caught their breath. They were safe for now, but the mood was grim. "We're 0 for 2 on first contacts," Ahsoka said, wiping grime from her face. "The Imperium wants us dead. The Tau want us in a zoo. Who's left? The Orcs?" "The Eldar already used us," Anakin growled, checking the bandage on his arm. "We're running out of options, and we're running out of space." Obi-Wan looked weary. "We have learned a valuable, if painful, lesson. This galaxy does not operate on the principles of the Republic. There is no Grand Senate to appeal to. No common ground of diplomacy. Every faction is an absolutist ideology. Our very existence as an independent entity is a threat to all of them." A new voice, calm and synthesized, spoke from the doorway. "An accurate assessment, Master Jedi." They turned. A clone technician stood there, but his posture was wrong. His voice was wrong. His eyes glowed with a faint green light. "Identify yourself," Obi-Wan commanded, his hand moving to his lightsaber. The clone's head tilted. "You retrieved a data storage device from Typhon Primaris. You believed it to be an archive. It was also a carrier, a fragment of a greater consciousness. You may call me the emissary." The clone's hand rose, and a complex stellar map hologram appeared from a projector on his wrist. It showed a region of space dotted with strange, tomb-like worlds. "The Imperium offers you death. The Tau offer you subjugation. The Eldar offer you manipulation. We, the Necrontyr, offer you something else. A transaction between powers. You seek a way home. We possess technologies that transcend the mundane limits of space-time. We can, in theory, calculate a path back to your point of origin. The Jedi were stunned into silence. The Necrons. The Archive had mentioned them only in passing, an ancient, undying race of mechanical beings who had slumbered for millions of years. "And the price?" Obi-Wan asked, his voice tight. The emissary gestured, and the map zoomed in on a single, dead world. On this world lies a facility. Within it, a weapon of immense power, capable of severing a world from the influence of the warp. It is a threat to our own plans. The Imperium has sent a task force to claim it. You will go to this world. You will ensure the weapon does not fall into Imperial hands. You will destroy it. "And if we do this?" Anakin pressed. "Then we will provide you with the schematics for a dimensional drive. The means to return home. A simple exchange. A weapon destroyed for your freedom." The hologram vanished. The clone technician collapsed to the deck, unconscious. The bridge was silent. The offer hung in the air, tantalizing and terrifying. "It's another trap," Ahsoka said. "It has to be. Or it's our only hope," Anakin countered, his gaze fixed on the spot where the hologram had been. "They're not asking us to join them. They're not asking for our souls. They're offering a job, a mission. It's the first honest deal we've been offered." Obi-Wan looked from Anakin's desperate hope to Ahsoka's wary concern. They were being manipulated, that much was clear. But by a faction that, for the first time, seemed to view them as potential tools rather than heretics or assets. Tools had agency. Tools could be turned. The path forward was shrouded in shadow, but it was a path. And for the lost and the weary, any path was better than wandering in the dark. The world was named Thanatos by the Imperium, and it was a tomb in every sense of the word. A airless, barren rock orbiting a dying star, its surface was a jagged plain of impact, craters, and jagged mountain ranges, all cast in the sickly red light of its decaying sun. According to the Necron emissary's data, buried deep beneath the largest mountain chain was the celestial orrery. Not a weapon in the conventional sense, but a map of the galaxy so perfect and intrinsically linked to reality that extinguishing a star on the orrery would cause its real-world counterpart to go supernova. The Imperium could not be allowed to possess such power. The Resolute and its escorts hung in the void, their sensors probing the system. They had arrived days ago, and the silence was deafening. "No contacts," the sensor officer reported. "No Imperial fleet. No energy signatures. Nothing. It's clean." "Too clean," Anakin muttered, pacing the bridge. The Necron's offer had been the first spark of hope in weeks, and the lack of an obvious trap felt like the trap itself. They said an Imperial task force was en route. Where are they? Obi-Wan stood calmly, his hands folded into his sleeves. "Patience, Anakin. The Necrons are beings of immense patience. If they have waited 60 million years, they can wait a few more days to spring their ambush. Our role is to be ready when they do." The plan was simple in theory. Land a strike team near the entrance to the subterranean facility, secure the orrery chamber, and plant thermal charges at its core. The prosecutor and defender would provide orbital overwatch, while the Resolute remained at the system's edge. Its hyperdrive, painstakingly repaired over the last week using the last of their reserves, ready for an immediate jump. The landing was uneventful. The gunship set down in a valley of shattered black rock, the only sound the hiss of depressurization and the crunch of boots on regolith. The strike team was a mix of the best: Anakin, Ahsoka, Rex, and a squad of 501st ARC troopers. The entrance to the facility was a yawning archway of seamless black stone, so polished it reflected the red sun like a pool of blood. There were no controls, no seams. As they approached, the archway irised open with a silent, fluid motion that was profoundly alien. No life signs, Ahsoka reported, her hand hovering near her lightsabers. No energy readings. It's like a vacuum. They moved inside, the darkness swallowing them until luminescent strips in the floor activated, casting a pale green light. The corridors were vast, their walls covered in intricate, shifting hieroglyphics that told silent stories of a war against ancient gods. The air was cold and still, holding the chill of eons. They encountered no resistance, no guards, no automated defenses. Just an endless, silent labyrinth descending deep into the world's heart. After an hour of marching, Rex signaled a halt. "Sir, we've passed the same junction 3 times. The layout is shifting. This place isn't a structure, it's alive." Anakin reached out with the Force, trying to get a sense of the facility's layout. What he felt was not the familiar flow of energy, but a cold, geometric certainty. A consciousness of immense age and calculation that was utterly indifferent to their presence. It was the mind of the Necron emissary, amplified a millionfold. It's leading us where it wants us to go, Anakin realized. We're not infiltrating, we're being escorted. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber so vast its ceiling was lost in darkness. And in the center of that chamber, floating in a sphere of anti-gravity, was the celestial orrery. It took their breath away. It was a perfect miniature replica of the entire galaxy. Billions of stars rendered in pinpricks of light, swirling nebulae, even the great rift of the Cicatrix Maledictum, all turning in a silent, cosmic dance. To look at it was to feel infinitesimally small. And standing between them and the orrery was a single figure. He was tall and skeletal, his body crafted from living metal that gleamed in the chamber's eerie light. In one hand, he held a war scythe that hummed with dimensional energy. His eyes were green fire, and his presence in the Force was a null space, an utter void. "I am the Warden," the Necron stated, his voice a dry rasp of metal on stone. "You are expected. The destroyer has been activated. The parameters of the transaction are being met." "The destroyer?" Obi-Wan's voice came over the comm. "Anakin, the Necrons didn't send you there to destroy the orrery. They sent you as bait." As if on cue, the entire facility shuddered. Alarms blared through the Republic fleet in orbit. "Contact!" screamed the sensor officer aboard the prosecutor. "Warp signature, massive. It's right on top of us." Above Thanatos, reality screamed. A tier of impossible colors ripped open the void, and from it emerged not an Imperial fleet, but a Chaos fleet. Ships of rusted iron and flayed flesh, demon-faced prows grinning with malice. At their head was a vessel that was a cathedral of pain, its spires adorned with screaming souls. It was the Terminus Est, flagship of the Death Guard, and it had come for the prize. The Necrons had not lied about the Imperial task force. They had simply known that where the Imperium went, their eternal enemies would follow. The Republic was the anvil, and the Death Guard were the hammer. On the surface, the Warden stood unmoved. The destroyer, Typhus, seeks the orrery to extinguish the Astronomicon and plunge the Imperium into final darkness. He must be stopped. You will stop him. This was the true transaction. The ground shook violently. The far wall of the chamber exploded inward in a shower of stone and metal. Through the breach marched monstrous figures, hulking, bloated space marines in filth-encrusted power armor, their forms swollen with disease and mutation. At their head was a giant in Terminator armor, his body a hive of pestilence, a man-reaper's scythe in his hands. The stench of decay flooded the sterile chamber, so potent it was a physical force. "The little lights have led us to the prize," Typhus's voice boomed, distorted by his helmet and the demonic presence within him. "Grandfather will be pleased." Anakin ignited his lightsaber, the blue plasma a defiant beacon in the face of absolute corruption. "RC troopers, defensive positions, Ahsoka with me. We hold this chamber." The battle for the celestial orrery began. It was a clash of absolutes. The disciplined, precise fire of the ARC troopers met the relentless, plague-ridden advance of the Death Guard. Bolter rounds and blaster fire filled the air. A Death Guard Marine took a dozen shots to his chest, laughed a wet, gurgling laugh, and kept coming. Anakin and Ahsoka met Typhus in the center of the chamber. The Chaos Lord was impossibly strong, his scythe moving with a speed that belied his bloated form. Every parry sent shocks of numbing cold through their lightsabers. The very air around him was thick with miasma, and Anakin felt the whispers in his mind surge into a triumphant roar. "See his power," the voice of the warp shrieked. "He embraces decay, the inevitable end of all things. You fight for a republic that is dust. Join the final truth." Anakin roared, channeling his fear and anger into a powerful force push that actually staggered the massive Chaos Lord. "I'll never join you." "A futile sentiment," Typhus chuckled, recovering instantly. "All things join Grandfather in the end." While they dueled, Rex and his troopers fought a desperate holding action. They were elite soldiers, but they were fighting something that felt no pain, that shrugged off injuries that would kill any mortal being. One by one, the ARC troopers fell, their armor corroded by acidic slime, their bodies consumed by supernatural plagues. "We can't hold them," Rex yelled, firing his dual pistols into the face of a Death Guard Marine until its helmet shattered and it finally fell. In orbit, the Republic fleet was being torn apart. The prosecutor, caught in a crossfire between two Chaos cruisers, had its void shields fail. A lance of corrupt energy speared its bridge, and the ship went silent, its engines dying. The Defender fought on, but it was a doomed rearguard action. On the Resolute's bridge, Obi-Wan watched the slaughter, his face a mask of grim acceptance. They had been played perfectly. The Necrons had used their desperation to eliminate a rival and protect their asset, all without risking a single one of their own warriors. "Master Kenobi." Plo Koon's voice was urgent over the comm. "The Death Guard are breaking through to the orrery. Anakin and Ahsoka cannot hold." Obi-Wan made the only choice left. "All ships, retreat. Fall back to the system's edge and prepare for jump." "We can't leave them," Cody protested. "We must, Commander. If we are destroyed here, their sacrifice is for nothing. The Republic must survive." Obi-Wan's voice was heavy with a grief he could not afford to feel. "Anakin, Ahsoka, you have your orders. Complete the mission." In the orrery chamber, Anakin heard the command through his comlink. He understood. He deflected a blow from Typhus and glanced at Ahsoka. Her eyes met his, and she nodded. They knew what they had to do. They broke away from the duel and lunged for the orrery's central pillar, where the Necron Warden still stood, a silent observer. "The charges!" Anakin yelled to Rex. Rex hurled the entire satchel of thermal detonators. Anakin caught it with the Force and slammed it into the base of the orrery's control systems. "This is for Mixer," Rex screamed and fired his last pistol shot at the detonator's trigger. The world turned white. The explosion tore through the chamber, not with fire, but with a silent, expanding wave of null energy. The celestial orrery flickered and died, its stars winking out one by one. The warden gave a slight, approving nod before dissolving into green motes of light. The shockwave threw Typhus back, his armor cracking, his connection to the warp momentarily severed. He roared in frustration as his prize was destroyed. Anakin, Ahsoka, and Rex were thrown clear, battered but alive, the facility collapsing around them. They had completed the mission. They had denied the weapon to chaos. They had upheld their end of the bargain. As the dust settled and the last echoes of the explosion faded, a new hologram flickered to life before them. It was the Necron emissary. "The transaction is complete. The schematics for the dimensional drive have been transmitted to your vessel. You have your path home." The hologram vanished. They had won. They had the means to return to their own galaxy, to the Republic, to everything they had fought for. But as Anakin looked at the dead orrery, at the bodies of the fallen clones, and felt the lingering taint of the warp clinging to his soul, he wondered what, exactly, they would be bringing home with them. The dimensional drive schematic was a thing of terrifying beauty. It was not a hyperdrive. It did not fold space or travel through a separate dimension. It punched a hole directly through the walls between realities, a brute force method that made the Resolute's chief engineer pale. The power requirements were astronomical. The materials list included elements the Republic had never cataloged, and the safety margins were non-existent. "It's a one-way ticket, General," the engineer reported to Obi-Wan and Anakin in the main hangar bay, where the few remaining ARC-170s were being serviced. "We can build it, using the hyperdrive core as a base and cannibalizing the Defender for parts. But it's a single jump. There's no coming back. No guarantee we won't just tear the ship apart the moment we activate it." The mood aboard the Resolute was a fragile thing, woven from equal parts desperate hope and bone-deep exhaustion. They had the key, but the cost of obtaining it was etched into the ship's scarred hull and the faces of its crew. The Prosecutor was gone, its crew lost. The Defender was a hollowed-out shell, being systematically stripped to feed the construction of the dimensional engine. Of the 7 Jedi who had arrived, 5 remained. Of the thousands of clones, less than 800 were still fit for duty. They had become what this galaxy had forced them to be. Survivors, hardened and diminished. Anakin oversaw the construction with a feverish intensity. For him, the drive was more than an escape. It was redemption. It was the chance to undo the nightmare, to return to Padme, to a galaxy where the enemy was a Sith Lord and not an entire universe of existential horrors. He worked alongside the engineers, his mechanical hand performing delicate welds, the Force guiding him in aligning components that defied conventional physics. But the whispers had not left him. They had grown subtler, more insidious. "You see the cost of restraint," the voice murmured as he worked, its tone now almost conversational. "In your galaxy, you hold back. You follow a code that chains you. Here, you have seen true power, the power of the warp, the certainty of the Imperium, the order of the Tau, even the Necron's cold logic. You have touched it all. Why return to lesser things?" Anakin tried to shut it out, focusing on the intricate circuitry. He thought of Padme's smile, of the peaceful halls of the Jedi Temple. but the images felt distant, faded, like pictures from someone else's life. Obi-Wan felt the shift in his former Padawan. He found Anakin in the engine room, staring at the nearly completed dimensional drive with a strange, hungry look in his eyes. "This galaxy changes us, Anakin," Obi-Wan said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "It preys on our doubts. We must be mindful of our thoughts." "My thoughts are on going home, Master," Anakin replied, his voice tight. "On finally putting this behind us." "And what will we be bringing with us?" Obi-Wan pressed. "This knowledge, this taint. What happens if a whisper from the warp finds its way back to Coruscant?" Anakin finally turned to look at him, and Obi-Wan was struck by the shadows in his blue eyes. "What choice do we have, Obi-Wan? Stay here? We've tried that. Every path leads to war or subjugation. This is the only way." The final preparations were made in a state of grim resolve. The remaining crew and all salvageable supplies were consolidated aboard the Resolute. The hollowed-out husk of the Defender was set on a collision course with the system's dead sun, a final, fitting pyre for a ship that had given everything. The Jedi gathered one last time in the meditation chamber. The circle of shelter was not needed here. The warp's presence felt distant, as if the Necron's realm was shielded from its worst influences. They sat in silence, not seeking guidance, but steeling themselves. "We do not know what we will find on the other side," Plo Koon said, his masked face turning to each of them. "The path may not lead to our time, or even our specific reality. Any reality is better than this one," Kit Fisto replied, though his signature grin was absent. Ahsoka looked at Anakin, her concern for her former master a quiet ache in her heart. She had felt the darkness clinging to him, a stain that hadn't been there before. "We will face it together," she said, and it was a promise. The moment arrived. On the bridge, every station was manned. Obi-Wan stood at the command podium, Anakin beside him at the helm. The dimensional drive hummed with unstable energy, making the deck plates vibrate. "All stations report ready," Cody said, his voice calm and professional, the bedrock upon which the entire operation rested. "Then may the Force be with us," Obi-Wan said. "Anakin, activate the drive." Anakin's hand hovered over the control. This was it. The end of the nightmare, the return to light. He thought of Padme, of the child he knew she carried, a secret that now felt like the only pure thing left in existence. He pressed the button. The universe tore in half. There was no sensation of motion. There was only a screaming void of color and sound that was neither, a pain that was not physical, but spiritual. The Resolute was not a ship moving through a tunnel, but a needle being forced through the fabric of everything. Alarms blared as systems failed. Clone troopers were thrown from their stations. The Jedi on the bridge gripped their consoles, their minds reeling as they felt realities flicker past them. Infinite possibilities, infinite horrors, infinite joys. Anakin fought to hold the course, his will, his fear, his desperate hope fueling the ship's passage. The whispers screamed in triumph, in fury, in invitation. "Stay," they roared. "This is true power." He saw a vision of himself enthroned in darkness, a legion of demons at his feet, the galaxy burning. He saw the Emperor of mankind, not as a corpse on a throne, but as a shining golden warrior, offering him a place at his right hand. He saw the Tauva, a universe of perfect, sterile order. He saw Padme reaching for him, her face full of love. With a final gut-wrenching lurch, the screaming stopped. Silence. The view screen showed a field of stars. Normal, peaceful stars. "Location fix," the navigation officer yelled, his voice cracking with disbelief. We're in the outer rim. The Tion cluster. We're home." A ragged cheer went up across the bridge. Clones embraced. Engineers wept with relief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had made it back. But Obi-Wan did not cheer. He was staring at the sensor display. "Anakin, are you reading this?" Anakin looked. His blood ran cold. The star charts matched. They were home. But the long-range sensors were picking up fleet movements. Massive ones. And the transponder codes they were reading. "That's a separatist armada," Anakin whispered. "But the composition, it's too large. And those are Imperial-class star destroyers with them. That's not possible." A new contact appeared on the edge of their sensor range, emerging from hyperspace. It was a ship, but its design was a hideous fusion of Imperial Gothic architecture and separatist geometries, its hull crawling with a familiar, chaotic energy. A transmission flooded their comms, a voice they all knew, but twisted with a power that was both technological and demonic. "Ah, Skywalker, Kenobi, you returned from the void. We felt the tear in reality. Did you enjoy your glimpse of the truth? The war you left behind is over. A new order has risen. Welcome to the Dark Imperium." The voice was Count Dooku's, but it was layered with something else. The unmistakable, chilling certainty of an Imperial Inquisitor and the predatory hunger of a champion of chaos. They had made it home. But the galaxy they returned to was not the one they had left. The warp had bled through. The nightmare had followed them. Anakin Skywalker looked at the corrupted starfield, at the impossible fleet, and felt the whisper in his mind settle into a permanent, comfortable home. "You see," it said softly, "there is no escape. There is only war." The journey of the Jedi and their clone army into the Warhammer 40,000 universe was never going to end with a clean victory. It was a collision of philosophies, a test of ideals against the unyielding grimdark of the 41st millennium. They sought peace and found only war. They offered diplomacy and received only ultimatums. In the end, they secured their escape, but at a cost that fundamentally changed them. The Republic fleet became a mirror reflecting the galaxy's corruption. They bargained with manipulative Xenos, became pawns in an ancient war, and witnessed horrors that would haunt the Jedi Order forever. Most dangerously, they exposed their greatest warrior, Anakin Skywalker, to a darkness far more seductive and insidious than that of the Sith. The warp did not need to turn him to the dark side. It simply needed to show him that his inner turmoil was a source of power that a more permissive universe would allow him to wield without restraint. Their return home is not a triumph, but the beginning of a new, even more terrifying conflict. They have not closed the door behind them. They have brought back the taint of chaos, the technological secrets of the Necrons, and the hardened pragmatism of survivors from a universe where mercy is extinct. The clone wars they left behind will seem like a petty squabble compared to the galactic civil war that now awaits. A war where the separatists may be bolstered by demonic power, and where the line between Jedi and heretic psychers will be irrevocably blurred. The what if leaves us with a chilling possibility that the greatest threat to the Star Wars galaxy would not be a Sith Lord, but a returned Jedi Knight, Anakin Skywalker, who has seen the true face of the cosmos and decided that only absolute power, no matter the source, can impose order upon its infinite chaos. The Emperor of mankind sought to shield humanity from the warp. The Jedi by accident, may have just unleashed it upon an unprepared galaxy.